Adventure Beneath the Crust, written and read by Tony College. Michael moved mountains as he rushed to the rope to swing from the trees. He swung from rope 1 to rope 2 and fell, his feet flying through bees. While falling, his feet flung a nest off of a nearby cave opening's crest. The bees buzzed and scurried and swarmed to sting, but Michael fell into a river from the rope swing. Safely underwater and fearing to surface, he swam as far as he could, remaining terribly nervous. And as he swam, he saw a sight he'd never seen before, a stone that seemed to shine with light at the peak of an underwater door. He rose and got his breath, safe from stinging bees, and dunked his head, by curiosity led, to see what he could see. Michael swam swimmingly over to the gem-laden door. It was as though in some past time it had been the entrance to a private mine. After surfacing for air twice, he arrived at the spot and dove under once more to see if it was as he thought. The door was 5 foot tall and maybe 3 foot wide. It could have been 2 foot deep with emeralds from side to side. There was a 4-inch window that Michael swiped clean, and when he did, his eyes he hid from the gleaming gold of heavenly sheen. After hours of searching, he found it was underneath 6 rocks, the key to the lock, and it was slightly buried in the riverbed ground. For the purpose of more naturally expressing myself, I will now write the rest of my account in the first person. I took the key in hand while 5 feet underwater and placed it in the lock. A step sprang from beneath the door, a large rock, as the key turned like the hands of a clock. And as the key turned, the door began to open, and the step that sprung from the stoop led up a staircase with gold on every side into the hollow hills that border the river. Where I met the buzzing bees is a cave that goes inside. Old tales, curious and grave, have been told about a ride of miners many years ago who entered the hills there. They haven't yet been found or seen, and others haven't dared to enter there in 100 years since, and the cave has long been sealed. Tons of rocks now sealed to block the entrance once revealed. But here I am, apparently in a connected offshoot of where they were many years ago. Pure silence surrounded my soul, and the shining gold seemed surreal. I walked the steps of stone, while in the hidden place alone, but loneliness I didn't feel. I'm guessing the light that lit the place came through the face of the water. Light from somewhere, the gold itself, if that's possible, was directed by mirrors up the staircase that seemed to reach as high as a tall cathedral. I went up nearly 30 steps and was looking down upon an ocean of gold from a landing in the staircase. I could continue up to I wasn't sure where, or I could enter through a doorway at the landing, full of more stony steps that went down into a purple glow. Whence it came, I did not know. Transfixed by the radiant purple, I began to see a color that appeared to me golden purple, or purple gold, the epitome of royalty, though words can't begin to describe its beauty. The purple gold glow drew me along with a sweet smell that seemed to accompany it as I walked towards it. The color and smell grew stronger the more steps I stepped down. 365 steps later, I arrived at the source. A garden with the most beautiful lavender, radiant as though the sun was shining through it from below. Rays of light shone out of it as though the garden sat on a sun. The lavender was alive, seemingly unveiled in all of its glorious essence, similar to how on a sunny day you sometimes get a glimpse of a flower's essence, and it smiles at you as though you have seen its soul. But this was altogether awe-inspiring to the point of being overwhelmed. I cried for a reason I knew not, as I slowly walked into the golden, glowing garden of lively lavender. The surrounding walls were wet with water, and the ground that wasn't grass seemed like glass, a crystal-like floor through which a terribly bright light shone through. As I slowly walked through the light-filled lavender land, I heard a crack. It seemed to be beneath my feet. I crawled at a slow pace, now afraid to possibly fall through the crystal-like ground. I made it through the garden without falling through the floor or fainting at the lavender I named Felicity. I was now walking through a bona fide cave tunnel. No steps, just wet rock above me, below me, and on each side. The tunnel was completely lit by the brilliant light of the garden. I think I walked a solid mile until I came to a dead end. Slightly depressed, I sighed and stomped my foot. Crack! I heard. I stood still as an icicle. After about 20 seconds of thinking of what I should do, I decided that I would walk as slowly as possible back towards where I came. Instead of stepping, I decided to gently slide my feet one at a time. Slide, slide, crack, I heard again, and now I could see light shining up through the ground. There must have been a thin layer of rock over top of a thin layer of the crystal-like ground that I saw in the garden. In desperation, I thought, if I jump as far as I can towards where I came, maybe I will land where the ground is not compromised. 3, 2, 1, I said in my head as I leaped. Landing on the ground, I heard no further crack. I was safe. Or so I thought. Whoosh! The whole floor fell out from under me, and all of my felicity was displaced by fear as I fell to what I thought would be my end. After about 12 seconds of falling, surrounded by beams of radiant light, I started to ponder, what is happening? Falling, falling fast and free, what will now be found by me? I've seen a sea of golden treasure, lush lavender more than I could measure. What could ever be down here? My wonder now displaced my fear. After a good 20 or 30 seconds of falling, I began to slow down as I was now passing through what seemed to be clouds, thick clouds. Clouds were catching me and carrying me from one to another. It seemed as though I shrunk and they grew. They were so thick it felt as though I was falling through cushiony cotton clouds. As the clouds grew thicker, I felt lighter, as though there was now a lesser force of gravity pulling upon me. Falling, falling, yet now it seems I'm gently flying through light beams. Falling through, pulling too, on clouds. But in a sky? When will I stop flying through? Where in the world am I? The rays of light now seem above me, as though it's a sunny day, still floating free, as a dove would be, on clouds. Am I okay? As I asked myself, I turned my head and looked below. I couldn't quite believe my eyes, yet it seemed as though a lush land of wonder, with hills and fields and trees. I thought that I was underground, but here are ponds and seas. Fragrant flowers and shining showers fall upon my nose. Refreshing rain from the clouds slowly now flows, just to cool my weary soul as I make a step. From the cloud, a foot from the ground, onto the grass I leapt. As I walked around this newfound place of water, trees, and hills, I looked upon my sunny face, reflected in a stream that from the side of a mountain spilled. Not knowing where I was, what to do, or where to go, I laid on the ground, with white flowers around, that from a distance looked like snow. I'm guessing that 3 or 4 hours passed until I woke up, scared stiff. Knock, knock, someone said, as they gently tapped me on the shoulder to wake me. We're in for a heavy rain, and you may want to take shelter, said a warm voice. Who are you? I asked the man as it started to rain. I'm Gabriel, he said. Let's go. I followed him over a picturesque hill into a valley with a purple stream flowing through, where there was an entrance into the hillside. As soon as we entered the shelter, the light rain turned to a downpour as thunder rolled across the green-gray sky. There was a table, a couple of lanterns, and a cot in this hillside hole. I wondered if it was Gabriel's home. I'm not sure where to start, I said. Where am I? Michael, you're in a hidden place. Here you are safe, but in many places beneath the crust, there is no safety. There is darkness, there is fire, and there is war. We are currently in a place where many great people used to dwell. Paradise, it was called. You came through the caves affectionately called Treasure's Trail. What a beautiful garden of lavender that lives there." "How did you know?" I asked him. And as though he didn't hear me ask, he said, "The 5 miners who were lost 100 years ago, they didn't die in the mines. An accident sealed the main entrance with tons of rocks, and they were never able to tell their discovery. They wound up here as well, and when they arrived at the surface, they never made it home. They surfaced in the east and lived the rest of their days in, I believe it was China." My heart dropped. I asked, "Am I going to make it home?" as I started to cry. With a grave look on his face, he said, as he looked into the winds that carried away the rain, opening the sky's doors to the sun again, "I will do everything in my power to see that you make it home. We will get you home." I didn't understand the heaviness and graveness with which he promised to get me home safe, but I trusted him. I ended up falling back to sleep, and when I rose it was night. The moon shone and the stars were bright. My heart was warmed by the cozy comfort of candlelight. And what I wanted more than anything was to be home. This was quite amazing, but I knew my family would be worried sick about me. Gabriel was resting, laying on the grass, sleeping, I think, yet with an aura of readiness as though standing at attention to a sovereign's command while sleeping. I really don't know what he was doing, but it was peculiar indeed, in a good way, of course. Thinking back on Gabriel, it seems that if you cut him, he would bleed goodness. There was never a shadow on his face. On the contrary, he seemed to willingly hold back and contain a light in his eyes that, if unleashed, may scare the bejesus out of me. So I'm thankful that he did that. When he woke up, my best guess is that it was 3 or 4 in the morning. He smiled good morning and said that he needed some time alone to plan my trip. I told him thank you, and he wandered off whistling towards the west. I sat and listened to bird songs and tried myself to hum along. When I did, some flew and hid, but others sat beside me. We sang together songs of forever. At least that's how it felt inside me. I skipped some rocks and imagined docks for ancient boats great and grand. That's the image that the scene sung to me while standing in the sand. The wind blew, the time flew, and soon Gabriel was back indeed. He scratched his head, and then he said, "Michael, we need to leave." He walked with haste back to his place and armed himself with sheath and sword. He looked at me and suddenly grabbed a lasso-like golden cord. What's going on?" I asked. "I'm sorry, Michael. There's no time for questions. If we wish to get you home, now is our window of time. Now is our window of opportunity." I don't know whether or not I imagined this or if it actually happened, but a horse seemed to gallop out of the gentle stream. A cream-white horse that seemed to radiate with a yellow hue. Gabriel grabbed me by the garment that he gave me, and we were off, zooming across the plains and hills to an unknown destination. Unknown to me, at least. We came to the side of a mountain, where 2 others with grave faces and glorious horses awaited us. They and Gabriel took counsel together. I was in their midst, but I didn't understand much of what they said, other than it seemed that their only aim was to get me home, and it seemed like they may face opposition on the way, as though getting to the surface at my particular location could prove perilous. Nathan, one of the 2 men, had maps and seemed to possess a mastery over them. Calabria, the second man, was the tactician. We entered the mountains with the horses. They accompanied us until the paths became narrow. They were left in a cleft to wait for the return of their masters, and hopefully not the return of me. The light from the opening was now completely gone. Our light was the light of crystal candles. The darkness was so thick that it seemed to weigh on me and even stick to me as we followed Nathan through the paths. It felt as though we went uphill for a good day's journey, and my legs felt like, well, I actually couldn't feel them anymore. This darkness carried with it a feeling that we were not welcome there. I soon realized why. Gabriel, Nathan, and Calabria seemed to disappear. I was yanked by my arm to join Calabria behind a rock. The 3 of them had their bows drawn with 3 arrows in each one. Whoosh! 9 arrows flew into the side of a beast as it shrieked. Gabriel leapt from a rock towards the neck of the beast wielding a sword, and with great force he slit its neck, while Nathan forced his sword up into its belly. Calabria dove on its head with his downturned sword, and the creature's final scream shook the mountain. To this day I feel a pain in my ears when I remember the sound. That day was many years ago, and time is a strange thing. A sight, a sound, a smell can take you back, even back to a place that you don't want to be. But the sting of the past can be neutralized by the healing power of the one who is greater than all, the Most High, who is timeless and yet in time to be with us, to shepherd us, to bind up our every wound, and to carry us in his arms. The dragon was slain. The darkness did not dissipate. It seemed as though it grew. The dragon's death aroused the hate of 10,000 eyes of green hue. We heard their heckling and their hissing, the venom in their voice. Home I was certainly missing. We were surrounded without choice, or so it seemed to me. A fire seemed to kindle in the eyes of my 3 friends, and Gabriel stepped forward, gazing at the ends of thousands upon thousands of nasty, evil eyes. Gabriel looked upon them, then looked up to the skies. He sang a song that seemed as though it was a prayer to God. He raised his sword up to the Lord in humble trust and awe. The singing turned from seeming worship of the Almighty to some type of utterance carrying great authority. It was as though the darkness drowned and fled before our eyes. A path of light shone like a break in the skies. The sea parted, and we walked through, our enemies fully bound. It felt as though the newfound glow came from the spiritual sound. A mighty voice, like many waters, flowed from Gabriel's soul. It felt to me as though he was under God's control. We walked untouched through the hordes of nasty creatures. Gabriel whispered, "Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies." We came to a stream flowing upwards in the middle of the earth's crust. We raised a raft and rowed it up for nearly 4 hours. We arrived at an open wooded area with pleasant birds and their songs that filled the forest. We rested there for the night, as though under the mighty hand and the shadow of the Almighty Father. I whispered, "You hem me in behind and before. You laid your hand on me. This knowledge is beyond me. It's lofty, I can't attain it. Where could I go from your spirit, or where could I flee from your presence? If I ascend up into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn and settle in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will hold me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, the light around me will be night. Even the darkness doesn't hide from you, but night shines as the day. The darkness is like light to you, for you formed my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I will give thanks to you. Your works are wonderful. My soul knows that very well. My frame wasn't hidden from you when I was made in secret, woven together in the depths of the earth. How precious are your thoughts to me. Search me and know my heart, and lead me in the way everlasting." We woke up early, and our rise was before the sun. Gabriel had a light air about him, happy and comfortable as though he was at home in his own backyard. Gabriel, in his light mood, asked if he could tell me a heavy thing. "Sure," I said. "The world is a strange place, Michael. As you now know, there are things happening beneath your feet that you cannot see. There are also things happening in the spiritual realm that you are unaware of. There are things above you, beneath you, even inside you sometimes, that are beyond understanding in the deep waters of your heart. I beg of you to remember this. Lean not on your own understanding and the things which you see with your eyes. Acknowledge God in all your ways. Trust him with all your heart. He will direct your path. Any other way is impossible. It's impossible to navigate this crazy world without his help You live in enemy territory, but the kingdom of God is within you, and so is the King himself by his Spirit, because you trust in him. You will see me again, Michael, though I may see you even before then. You will face trouble, persecution, betrayal, false accusations, and temptations of many kinds. Take heart, for Jesus has overcome the world. You shall walk into the darkness and set captives free in the power of Jesus' name. You shall be set apart and carry authority to speak, and the deaf and lame shall leap, shall hear, and yes, the blind shall see, when the Spirit is poured out unto the praise of God's glory. Gird your loins and strengthen your heart in the Lord. He is your ever-present help, and his word is your sword. I saw a geyser in the distance, and we all walked towards it. No one said that the journey was over, but I felt in my heart that I would be home soon. Nathan and Calabria said goodbye to me and patted my head as though to bless me on my way. They veered right towards what seemed to be a mountain stream flowing on the far side of a vast field of lavender and orange poppies. Gabriel and I walked towards the gushing geyser. He grabbed a lily pad from the lake surrounding it that must have been 12 feet in diameter. We sat on it as we paddled towards the geyser. There was a marked spot to dock in before pushing on a bar connected to a system of levers that lifted us up nearly 20 feet in the air. Once lifted, there was a release rod that, when pushed, let us fall quickly while directing us toward the center of the strong current. Straight into the air we went for what seemed to be a mile. About halfway through, we entered what seemed to be the bottom of a great rock structure. Eventually, the tunnel seemed to be cushioned with water and full of clouds. We slowly stopped accelerating upward and began falling downward. Gabriel grabbed my arm and grabbed one of the 20-odd ropes that each swung to their respective tunnel systems. According to my calculations, we should have a 20-meter walk from here to the cavern you entered via the underwater door. As long as we don't make a wrong turn and we make all the right turns, we will end up right where we need to be. And thankfully we did. On our way, I asked Gabriel question after question, and in each of his answers, though sometimes vague, he directed my heart to trust in God and his Son Jesus, in whom is hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Curiosity is fruitful and good when consecrated, but curiosity for the sake of curiosity, a mere lust for knowledge, zaps life and leads down never-ending paths of peril. We walked through the gold and purple garden of lavender, and we saw the sea of gold. We said farewell at the door to the lake. He opened it for me and bid me farewell. We shall meet again, Michael, cherished of the Lord and strong. Thank you, Gabriel, for everything. It was my honor to serve, Michael. Diving into the deep lake, deep as a 6-foot deep lake can be, rising into the fresh air, and beholding the familiar trees. Down the hill I ran with speed in hopes of arriving home, with time to apologize and make my story known. I knocked at the door, and my mother answered. "Michael, you're 20 minutes late." "I'm what?" I asked. She said, "You're 20 minutes late for dinner. I told you to be home at 4:30 to help around the house before dinner." "Don't do it again." I was shocked. I would have guessed that I was easily gone for 2 days. Amazed that some wonder of time had occurred, and wondering if it was all a dream, I smiled in the sunshine of my mother's presence, kissed my baby sister on the head, and said, "Yes, Mum, it won't happen again. How can I make it up to you? Get this table set and don't do it again." She hugged me with a handful of green beans, then threw them on a buttery skillet.